One of the things that we really want to do is we have a really great school resource officer. He is so fun, and he's really trying to make a connection with all the students. So we want to invite him to our back to school staff PBIS training day and arm him with some Colts Cash, which is our reward system. And so whenever he's out walking and doing his thing and he sees the things on our matrix, he can also be a part of that incentive process. Because, you know, he doesn't just need to be a scary guy you see when you might be in trouble. He's also really personable and really loves our students. So we want to involve him in more than just the scary stuff, you know.
Great. Thank you.
So our group just had a conversation about what community data might be available. We're not quite sure, actually. We did some brainstorming about the data that we would love to have, but we're not sure how to access that. And then the conversation kind of went into having better communication between the school resource officers and maybe other community agencies or law enforcement officers in the community, so that there's kind of greater information at the school level about what families and students are going through kind of in real time, so that we can be more responsive to those needs. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So really finding and unpacking that community data and really making and customizing it to fit your specific community's needs. I love it, thank you.
So we continued on that same discussion. We right now have a community garden being built at our school. So we have a leadership, Douglas County, where we're at, that's working on that garden. And there's a lot of individuals there that are doctors or have other connections in the community that we could invite in to what we think probably like quarterly meetings, so we can try to get some of their insight. We also talked about the data that we keep. So one of the discussions yesterday was like, how many times are our students going to the nurse just to get out of something, or to our counselor? So trying to keep better track of that to help provide some support. And then like we haven't utilized our nurses probably as well as we could, with a lot of the community outreach that she does for food closet or clothes for kids in the winter. So bringing her into that process as well. Right.
And the very kids that don't have basic needs met are going to seeking it out through the school nurse. So that person is a fantastic resource to have on the team. Brilliant, thank you.
We talked about, I think we brought it up yesterday, our Native American population. We really feel like on the reservation there's the Healing Center, and many of our kids go through that for mental health help. And so maybe we could get someone who works there to come sit in on some of our meetings. We were hoping for a Native American representative, both male and female, because I think those perspectives are different. We also would want to invite FISH. Do you guys all know what FISH is?
FISH. I don't know what FISH is. I mean, I know what FISH
Friends
is
Service
or are,
Helping.
but what is it?
Friends in Service Helping. It's an organization that provides clothing and food and goods to families. And so they would be a great, their lens is different than our lens. They provide for us, but we don't always see what happens. We have a center in our community, and so it would be great to see what they think. And additionally, our school resource officers. So
beautiful. Yeah, I keep thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, particularly as we look at the economic divide that continues to grow in this country. And the number, I mean, if any of you saw the UN report on the number of kids and families in poverty, and some of the third world conditions that a lot of our communities are in, it's pretty painful. So I think that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where the basic needs really have to be met if we're going to expect our kids to be functioning in our schools, is a really important lens to have.
We just talked about how our Tier 1 teams are very similar, even though I'm middle school and she's elementary, how we can support them, and getting community partners to come in for funding. We have, I'd use boarding passes as the tickets, and we're always short on funds, and so how do we get community partners to come in and help us with the funding and the incentives?
Okay, good. We're going to go into implementation in a second, and I'm gonna ask that we have an open mind as we go into our acknowledgement system here. As perfect.
My turn.
Your turn. Thank you so much.
So we came up with more than what you had asked for, and that's
Good.
shocking because we're the ones that are crying about how we hardly have any resources until actually we put our heads together and we came up with more than 2. So, but one of the things that we talked about earlier was we want to get our high school, because we're the feeder school to the high school, which is a middle school and a high school just up the road from us, involved
Great.
in this, as well as there's a community center. It's like a Parks and Rec department, but because a lot of our children either start the day out at that community center and then get on the bus and come to school,
Yes.
or they end the day at that community
Yes.
center. Those individuals, those employees or people that work there would be, really valuable to this whole interconnected web. We also have an amazing Rotary Club up at the lake, and they do all sorts of wonderful philanthropic things for our schools. And so we were thinking about inviting 1 or 2 of their members, which I don't know that we really saw a community organization like that on any of your slides, but they do so much for us financially that I think they would be a great link
Great.
to have. And then while the only hospital at the lake is on the California side, everybody goes to it if they have to, and there is a mental health department within that hospital, so that would be another entity that
Yeah.
could serve our on this committee. And then finally, we have a couple of board members that one of which is very involved in the Valley Family Support Council, and we think she would be amazing to have. And then there's a board member that kind of represents the lake schools, and we were thinking about adding him to the list as well. So we came up with quite a few. And then, of course, the public library, when it's open, which isn't very often, and then our nurse, which
Great.
we don't have one yet, but we will.
Great,
Yeah.
great. Those are all brilliant. I love the way you guys are really thinking outside of kind of the box and thinking about how to really get some resources that are available but haven't really been consumed yet. And I'm hearing that a marketing approach might be required, right? And so if you don't already have somebody on your team that has knowledge about branding and marketing, we always pick on the marketing department in our large comprehensive high schools to have the students serve as the marketing campaign. But to the extent that you can invest in some branding and marketing, and the first thing I will say is, if you really want to institutionalize this way of work, the core features with MTSS, don't call it MTSS or ISF or PBIS. Call it the Mustang way. Call it, right? Anchor it to the foundation of your community and brand it that way, right? We need to know it's MTSS. We need to know the core features, right? The pedagogy needs to know that. That's where we go to touch on the research, but it's not important for the community to invest in PBIS. Furthermore, PBIS has we need to debunk the myths about what PBIS is. And we're going to do that through the implementation section of this, because people are walking away thinking it's one thing, and it is the core features of MTSS. And people we made the mistake, I think, of spending time on the acknowledgement system, and we let teams get away with the first couple of years of planning parties because that was the fun part. And we didn't say, no, it's really rigorously assessing what your kids need and having an instructional approach exactly the way we do academics, and use that protocol and approach with social, emotional, and behavior. And we weren't standing up to that enough in the beginning, and now we are. Now we're saying, I don't spend any time on acknowledgements other than to foster care and connections with every single person. And we'll get into that in implementation because I'll get on my soapbox. But we have to debunk the myths. So if it's gotten a bad rap in your community, don't call it that. Call it, anchor it to your school mascot, your school colors, your school motto, and that's the way you're going to institutionalize it, which will mean you'll sustain it, right? Thank you.
Well, I don't know how well we're following our roles that we established yesterday, but I'm going to just kind of report out a couple of things that I think we talked about. From my perspective, I think it was really important earlier in our conversation about what is the difference between MTSS, PBIS, Interconnected Systems Framework, and how do we communicate that to our state teams and also consolidate them into a leadership team, a state leadership team. So I think one of the things that I wanted to share is that we, on this MTSS state leadership team, we spent a lot of time so far going over, like trying to get the understanding of different districts' understanding of MTSS and trying to incorporate that into a state manual, as opposed to getting a true understanding within our own state leadership team and aligning those district understandings with what it actually is. I don't know if that's
Right.
that's kind of what I got out of it, the most important thing. But who else wants to speak?
Because we didn't go down to the building level team, we also had an opportunity to revisit what we said we were going to do with our state level body, and we transferred our notes into a virtual action plan. So we had a little bit more time to rehash that and come to consensus
Great.
that, yeah, those really are the things we still want to do. They're good as they were yesterday.
Right. And Kelly's wanting to say something.
Sorry. So just again, appreciating that whole business about what we call things and language is important. As you wrestle with this even state conversation about further defining MTSS and the initiatives that are under that umbrella, where I live in Pennsylvania, we have purposely called our state leadership group a community of practice. And it's all around, again, this idea of stakeholders coming together to coalesce around these issues and data that are important, including, State Department of Education, Health and Human Services, et cetera. And it has brought to the table, again, those family advocacy groups and university partners and others. And it's more about those things that we've talked about thus far, and gets away from, again, do we call it MTSS, PBIS, ISF? You said COLT cash, C-O-L-T. But the first time she said it, I'm not going to lie, I thought she said Kohl's cash. And that, I can be reinforced too, so, okay. All right. So,
Kohl's.
Kohl's.
All right, got
the
it.
department store.
Got it.
What is spend 50, get 10? I don't know, but anyway. So, but these things it's all connected. So we'll keep coming back to it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. That's really helpful, and I'm really I'm hopeful that this group continues a professional learning community throughout the year so we can continue the dialogue, because you guys have such rich information to share with one another. And I feel like facilitating that on a monthly basis on a webinar is something that will nurture your soul as you move through this process will be really important. Okay, so let's move to implementation. And I'm going to do this really quick. Some of these slides you've seen, but we'll go into a little bit more depth and detail. So at the heart and soul of what our PBIS efforts is the core curriculum, right? And the teaching matrix represents our setting up our common language, our common way of work, our common approach. And this should be, don't kill me, a fluid document. And I know you've spent a lot of time and energy on printing these and putting these on as posters across your schools, but they need to be fluid. So when you're looking at your data and you're seeing error patterns, or when you're looking at your screening data and you're seeing 30% of your kids feeling anxious and needing coping skills, you're going to your teaching matrix and you're inputting the replacement skills you want to see, so then that will elevate everyone to pay close attention to the skills we're on the lookout for, right? So this teaching matrix is gold. This is your core social, emotional behavior curriculum. And these are the behaviors you're on the lookout for constantly. In this example, when we took our schools through training, we focused on behaviors we wanted to see. And now we're going to ask you to enhance that. We want to move from, yes, being safe is keeping my hands and feet to myself, but it's also teaching our kids how to talk to adults when they're worried about their friends. Being respectful, yeah, I'm going to use a public or private signal to ask a question, but being respectful also is about making sure we're on the lookout that everybody gets a turn. And being responsible, yeah, we need to turn in our work on time, and we're going to go through those procedures on how to do that. But it also means I'm going to check in my feelings across the day, and I know how to do that because it's taught in the social emotional curriculum. And we're pulling out the items that are essential for our kids because the data shows that a large number of kids need this replacement skill and need the skill to move around in their school, in their classroom. And we're going to elevate it and get it on that teaching matrix. And when we elevate it, it's all hands on deck. And this is where that mental health for all comes into play. So no, as a teacher, as a classroom teacher, I'm not going to conduct clinical group counseling sessions. But I am responsible for teaching my kids in my classroom to check in on their feelings when I see them ramp up. And I'm going to model that behavior for them, and I'm going to prompt and reinforce when I see them using that behavior in my classroom. And there's where your MOU is going to get driven in the school building. We're going to be very clear about our roles and functions, and we're going to have our clinically trained staff, our student support staff, like school psychologists, school social workers, they hold those skills, but they need to create the capacity for everybody to have mental health skills. One of my most favorite questions to ask faculty or districts that I'm working with is, who here has mental health? And everybody goes, ooh, I don't know how to answer that. But it means that everybody needs skills to navigate this life, right? I need more skills than I've ever needed to navigate my life right now. I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast. I can handle a hurricane and a tornado any day. I'm not so sure about this fire thing, right? We moved to Santa Rosa last July. October 9th, I was awakened by smoke and evacuated within 30 seconds with my son and my dog, right? Which has left a very dramatic impact and talk about, here I am being a, quote, expert on trauma-informed care, going, oh my God, I completely get what, for a very short window of time, because I had something to normalize back to, thank God, but I completely got for 2 weeks what it must feel like for our kids to be in class and not physically be able to tune in because their physical system was overriding anything that they were able to cognitively be aware of, right? I totally got that, and I got that. And you know, we're about to revisit that time right now, so I know this urgency of getting ready for not only the kids, but the entire community, right? So this is essential. This is essential to being able to maneuver through our day by pulling it up and making it everybody's job. Not only the staff, but the kids. The kids should be helping one another with this too, right? We should be turning around to each other. And you know you've got this in place when the peers are going, hey man, that's not cool, we don't do that here. Or hey man, did you check in on your feelings? I'm in a number 2, but if we can do this deep breathing exercise together, we can get through this. You know it's permeated the system when you're there. Okay, so specific behaviors, yeah, go for them. We absolutely need procedures and routines, and we need to see explicit behavior being taught, but go here too. Choose kindness over being right. Pick up your trash even if it isn't yours, right? Let's establish a community like that. Encourage others. Tell peers that they did a good job. Teach them specific praise and ways to deliver specific praise. So it's not just about the staff, it's encouraging that whole community. So I love to put slides on here that nobody can read. Yeah, so nice job, Suze. This is in that social emotional competency handout that we've given you. So we showed you a version of this yesterday when we focused in on lunch. And I'm going to take some time here because this is how important this is. I know you guys have a lot of posters on your wall. This should be the only poster on your walls, right? I'm not kidding, the teaching matrix. And it's the script that we should all be nagging each other to go to constantly embed this into every aspect of our day. So I'm a former school counselor in addition to being a recovering middle school principal, right? So when I was a school counselor, and I'm going to show my age here, anybody remember Duso the dolphin? Yay! Okay, developing and understanding self and others. My primary role was to teach the social emotional curriculum to every student in the building. Guess how that went off? Not great, right? So I'd go in, I'd do my counseling lesson of the day, hit every classroom. As soon as I'd walk in, guess what would happen? The teacher would leave. We would do so for 30 minutes. When I left, the likelihood that they took those skills and carried them through the day, 0% chance of that happening. So we need to reshuffle the deck in terms of, I'm not sure if anybody's still, they're obviously not doing Duso the dolphin because nobody except for you and I knew what that was. By the way, my husband, side note, fell in love with me when he saw me doing, we were co-teaching one day and he was like, oh, you were so cute doing that thing. That's when I fell in love with you. All right, too much information. So here's why this is important. So when you're in that mode and you're teaching that skill of the month or you're teaching that session, if we get those essential replacement skills and strategies we want to see as a result of that lesson, we translate it onto the teaching matrix. And then we elevate it so it's that common script that everybody's now responsible for being on the lookout for, right? So in this example, this school chose lunch as their area of focus. And the reason they did that is because they started to get student focus groups. They started the morning meeting structure that Restorative Practice had brought to them. And they saw how essential it was to really get student input into the teaching matrix, specifically around areas that they had not really been concerned too much about, except that they saw a decrease in kids going to lunch, literally leaving school early to avoid lunch. And it started to kind of percolate in the data, but it was the survey data that really got their attention, and the focus groups and the student input. And here's what they said. Keep in mind, this is an elementary school. We walk around with phones and we're attached to social media. And sometimes we get embarrassed. And I can handle being embarrassed from the night before, something that happened on social media in my classroom. I can't handle it going into a large social arena, is basically what they said. So they're already anxious about the social arena anyway, but because of the social media platform, it just elevated that feeling. The other thing that happened in the surveys is that, you know what? Our school's gotten overcrowded. There's nowhere to sit at lunch. So I worry that if I'm standing in line getting my lunch, I'm not going to be able to sit with my friends. So here's what they did. They decided to do a flexible lunch period. And they said, if you're feeling very social, go to lunch, you have lunch. But we're also going to offer these quiet spaces for you to have lunch with your friends. And they also looked at their social emotional curriculum and picked out the lessons around coping skills around anxiety, because enough kids were reporting they were feeling anxious around this. So you can see how they augmented their teaching matrix, and they have now in lunch, I'm going to have a lunch plan, choose a quieter social area, invite friends to join in, use my breathing techniques to feel calm, tune in and listen to my personal signals, use indoor voices for speaking, invite those who are alone to join in, offer to share as appropriate, act in a manner that acknowledges others' feelings and preferences. Now, all of these lessons are getting taught in Skill of the Month in their social emotional curriculum, and they're bringing them forward so that they've created the platform for teachers to say, hey guys, in 20 minutes we're going to lunch. Make sure you've got your lunch plan prepared. And if you're feeling like it's too much to handle, here are the 3 quiet spaces you've got to plan for, and invite others to join you. And so they totally flex that out. They've also had opportunities for kids to go to specific social skills sessions during lunch. So they're not taking away from instructional time. So they've completely flexed out lunch in that way. But also notice that it's infiltrated, the other social emotional parts of the curriculum have infiltrated other aspects of the teaching matrix. And you'll see those highlighted in green. So this is a very fluid document, and it oftentimes will change depending on the data set or the focus group, and the voice of the kids is really driving this change. Another example, this is a middle school example. Again, kids were saying, man, you guys have had this teaching matrix up for a long time. That's way cool. Things have gotten better. But we're still not seeing the adults model the behaviors. We still feel vulnerable when we go in the hallways and we go in the bathrooms. So the team took that data, that information back from the kids, and now there's a guide me section on the bottom of the matrix so that adults now have very explicit rules and functions about guiding kids and supporting kids to feel safe in these really unsupervised areas. So now you've got, okay, teachers, we're all going to supervise groups of students at all times. We're going to know the locations of our students at all times. We're going to monitor students by being in our hallways during transition times. We're going to monitor the bathrooms. We'll stand by the bathrooms. We'll arrive on time and pick up students on time. Apparently time is a big issue in this school. And we'll supervise and be prepared. We will own that. And we will demonstrate and work with our focus, our peers. We will make sure that we're adhering to that with the data that we're getting from our focus groups from the kids on an ongoing basis. So again, very fluid document. So it's a great time for you guys to be talking about boosting Tier 1 implementation, because this is a time to kind of reflect out what's actually on that teaching matrix and make sure that it's getting really seeped into every aspect of the day. One more example, if you're starting to be very concerned, again, by bullying, again, it's a perfect opportunity to see the connection, incorporate this into the teaching matrix. Anything you want to teach your kids goes on here. Anytime you have that Pepto-Bismol moment where you're like, oh, we've got so many kids that need this, think Tier 1. What are the replacement skills and strategies they need, and get it onto the teaching matrix. So I love this. Again, they have used a stop, walk, talk opportunity, but they've also got the incorporated invite others who are alone to join in. We talked about this yesterday, so we're moving into 1.5 into definitions. I told you I was going to throw a lot at you, and then I promise you'll have time to action plan. But this is the subscale. We're still in implementation. We're on 1.5 problem behavior definitions in your action planning guide, and we're going to look at those referral procedures again. So we talked about this yesterday a little bit in the time out of class. I'm going to spend just a couple more minutes on it. So you'll notice how many of you are using SWIS to collect and analyze office referral patterns. Oh my gosh, look at that. That's awesome. So so if I was going to be a principal again, which I might at one point in time, SWIS would be the thing I would definitely write a personal check out to. But okay, so remember this from yesterday. We're changing this to time out of class rather than an office discipline referral. This is that social service lens that we're starting to use and starting to craft. We're not only concerned about kind of these problem behaviors, but we're really concerned about kids who, and I think of my son Connor here, I can remember when he was in middle school, if he had had an office referral, it would have been the end of him, literally. It would have taken him down. But man, that kid could throw up a hand any day of the week and complain about a headache or a stomach ache and get out of that math test or that math quiz or whatever kind of math element he had. And as soon as we saw that pattern, we kicked it up a notch, right? So again, pay attention to the nurse and the school counselor. pay attention to time out of class. Have an opportunity for kids to sign out. So if they go to the restroom, if they go to the nurse, if they go to the counselor, have a list of your kids and have a sign out pad that they're signing out so you can track instructional minutes. If they're missing instructional minutes, they're not going to get the academic gains that you're expecting. And so there's going to be a lot of instructional minutes to recapture. The other thing I like about this example that we didn't go into yesterday is the school did a brilliant thing. They looked at their data and they said, you know what, most of our office referrals come from the classroom. And that's true from a national perspective too. 90% of the action usually comes from the classroom. They said, well, let's take a deeper dive and let's really get our investigative hats on and figure out what's going on right before the behavior occurs. Brilliant, right? So they put this in. Okay, they put this in. What activity was the student engaged in when the event or complaint took place? Was it whole group instruction, small group instruction, individual seat work, working with peers, right? If I can predict it as a classroom teacher, I can prevent it. If I know that 3 of my kids during individual seat work are probably going to raise their hand and leave or have some anxiety or have maybe a behavior problem, I can rearrange the environment to decrease the likelihood that that happens. Yes?
So is this more for the teacher or not the teacher, whoever is writing this ODR, is this for more of their reflection? Because that section is not included in SWIS.
Exactly. So this was a modification. This was customized to fit the needs of what the school wanted to collect. And you're absolutely right. What they did, the workaround with SWIS, is that now they have Google Drive, but back then they were still printing. They printed it in a different color, right? So the minor things, the things that we wanted the teachers to track were printed on yellow. The things we wanted to put into SWIS were copied in white. The things that went to the school nurse or that were kind of a mental health or an internalizing condition were printed on pink. So they had a system that they organized around collecting that data. I'm not necessarily suggesting that you put nurse or school counselor on your office referral form. What I am suggesting though is get the school nurse log and school counselor log in front of you as a data point in your team if it's too complicated to include that.
Sorry, I think the bottom part.
The bottom part, right. So the bottom part is a trick. The bottom part is a field-based intervention to get teachers to pay more attention to that. So when I'm a teacher and I'm filling that out, I'm going, holy cow, I see a pattern here, right? So that's the trick, right, to engage. And that way, if you've got a specific coach working with an individual teacher, they can actually look at the minor tracking information and look at that and sort it and go, here's some patterns that are emerging.
People submit you this same situation day in, day out, and they don't realize, hey, change something, you know?
Right.
That can help them
Right.
do some self-reflection.
Right. So that's that skill that we have to own, right? What I think PBIS helps us do is, yes, there are individuals that need support from us, but we always need to stand back and look at the way the environment shapes our behavior, right? And look at the systems and the structures and the adults that are shaping the behavior of the kids. And how do we change and modify that to make sure that a wider range of kids are successful in our classroom? And that is what that does. So it might not be something that you're putting into SWIS, but as a teacher, I've got it more of an investigative mode on. And if I've got that social service lens mode on, I'm much more likely to take a supportive measure than an exclusionary measure. Right? Think about that for a second. If I'm looking at this in a social service lens and thinking about what does this student need from me, then I'm much more likely to take a supportive measure than an exclusionary one. Not to say that some kids need to leave the instructional environment because they're ruining it for everybody, but when I have a re-engagement protocol and I'm going to do something different, I'm going to kick it up a notch to make sure that that student doesn't sit in that pattern day in, day out, that we're going to provide the necessary support so we don't have Groundhog Day. And that's up to me to do. Okay, we're still on implementation. I promise I'm okay, let me ask a question. Is your brain full enough that we need to do some action planning time right now? Yes. Okay, so 20 minutes I'll give you, and then we'll keep going with implementation, but I felt that, like, stop talking, we need to plan. So 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll do a quick report out and we'll continue on.